All right. Looking at this lesson, we're thinking about church finances, and we talked last week about how churches raise money in the Bible. It's not through, bake sales and entering into business and things like that, but it's the free will offering of the members done on the first day of the week. We come together and we offer up that sacrifice, as Paul talks about in Philippians 4, the sweet smelling aroma that is offered. And we're also thinking about how then that money is used. What do you do with it? And one of the big areas in the New Testament that is described is the area of benevolence. And we talked about how that was a huge part of the finances of the church in the first century, because a lot of the saints were very poor. So, for instance, in modern times, in our country, there's not a great need for benevolence. It does come up now and again in our nation, in our day and age. But you go to a place like the Philippines, and there's a lot more of the contribution that is devoted to benevolence, because there's a lot greater need in places like that, where people have a very hard time getting by just with the basics: food, clothing, shelter, medical care, things like that. And so it's not as though when you look into the New Testament, there's one thing that the finances are used on, or even that there's an apportionment that is a set apportionment, like 80% goes to benevolence and 10% goes to facilitating worship and 10% goes to evangelism. That's fluid, depending on the needs and the work that the church is engaged in. So with that understanding, though, when we think about the area of benevolence, question number 6 on that sheet was: explain why a church is not authorized to provide benevolence to members of the community. So does anybody have anything on that?
Well, the examples that we have in the New Testament of benevolence being done is in Acts 4, the needy among them; in Acts 2, there were believers that were helping; in Romans 15, the poor among the Lord's people are mentioned. Once we give our money, it's the Lord. So we're only authorized to use it in ways of the Lord has shown us. That's all we have examples of. We can see what happens when we do things that the Lord doesn't like. Evangelize, inspire different people who did things improperly, and the punishment they receive. It's not something that we're allowed to do. We don't want to be guilty of it. Then we would be embezzling the Lord's money and spending on unauthorized.
Okay, so to make a point of clarification that John brought up there, and Peter actually makes this point in Acts chapter 5 to Ananias and Sapphira in dealing with them. He says, while it was yours, you could do with it what you wanted to. And so there's a difference between what we individually, personally, individuals, or as households, as families, can spend our money upon, where we can help people or not help people, depending on our judgment, opportunities, abilities, things like that. So that's pretty open. But when it's put into the common collective, and it is the Lord's money, as John said, then there are restrictions that are placed upon it. I guess parallel or similar to, like, there's certain things by law, technically, that either the city government, the state government, the federal government can spend the revenue upon. Now, we know there's fraud, waste, and abuse, but to John's point, we do not, in the Lord's body, want to be guilty of fraud, waste, and abuse. We've got to avoid that. And so there are certain restrictions. And when it comes to benevolence, let's begin with some of those passages he was talking about. Let's back up to Acts 2. Acts 2, verses 44 and 45. Let's read that. Acts 2, 44, 45. So remember, the church is established in Acts 2. About 3,000 obey the gospel that day. Acts 2, 44, 45. Who will read that? Go ahead, Elijah.
Now all who believe that together, they had all things in common, so their possessions were given life on all.
Okay, so a case of benevolence, verse 44, all who believe. That's who was involved. Acts chapter 4. Acts 4, verses 32 to 36. Carter, you want to get that?
A multitude of those who believed were of one heart and one soul. Neither did anyone say that any of the things he possessed was his own, for they had all things in common. And with great power the apostles gave witness to the resurrection of the Lord Jesus, and great grace was upon them all. Nor was there anyone among them who lacked, for all who were possessors of land or houses sold them, and brought the proceeds of things that were sold, and laid them at the apostles' feet, and they were distributed to each as anyone had need. And Joseph, who was also named Barnabas by the apostles, which is translated son of courage, a Levite of the country of Cyprus.
Go ahead, 37.
Having land, sold it, and brought the money, laid it at the apostles' feet.
Okay, another case of benevolence. People are in need. Who's involved? Believers, saints. So you go to Acts 6. We won't read these, but Acts 6, 1 through 6, what's happening here? Just really take a peek at the first verse. There's a daily distribution that's taking place. Who's receiving that distribution? Widows. From what subgroup of society?
The Hellenists.
Okay, Hellenists in Hebrews.
Yes.
They've got a dispute going on, and it's among those disciples that were there in Jerusalem. So you have the disciples looking after widows who have these needs day to day. They need the ability to buy food day to day, perhaps some other things that are required, but it's that daily distribution to help them out in their material needs. So let's go to Acts 11. Acts 11, and let's read 27 to 30 here. So in Acts 2, Acts 4, Acts 6, that's a local congregation, members among that congregation who had needs, and those needs were being met by the congregation. And as it said in Acts 4, verse 37, when Barnabas laid the proceeds at the apostles' feet, that's talking about it's going into a common treasury. This was not Barnabas selling his land, taking that money, and himself divvying it up. He took the proceeds and put it at the apostles' feet. In Acts 5, when you read about Ananias and Sapphira, they've done the same thing. Now, there's an issue with them, but the concept is there's a common treasury, and there's distribution being made out of that common treasury to the ones among them that had the need. So, local help, Acts 2, Acts 4, Acts 6. Now let's read Acts 11, 27 to 30. Did you have something, John, before?
Well, just interspersed in all these accounts of the saints taking their land and their property and selling it. If you want to say it, not be disrespectful, the church was flush at the money at this time. And interspersed in these accounts is Peter encountering a beggar and said, "Gold and silver have I none." Well, he wasn't lying, but he didn't have authority to take from the treasury to help that man, because he evidently wasn't a member of the church. So we see an example, they did not use the money to help somebody.
Yeah, that's a good point. So Acts 2, there's distribution. They're taking care of people. There's no problem raising the funds. Acts 3, immediately after that, Peter says, I don't have anything to give to this beggar who is at the temple, the gate beautiful there. Very, very good point there. So great contrast. So Acts 11, 27 to 30. Go ahead, Josh. All right, so humor me. What's happening here? Who's in need? Who is lacking and needs help here? Brethren of Judea. And why is that? In verse 28, particularly, what is said about that famine? Okay, anything else said? What about the time frame? Okay, during the days of Claudius Caesar. It is yet to happen. So they have knowledge of a future event that they are taking up funds to address. So it's a little bit of a side point, but it deals with church finances altogether. You can see things coming down the road. Hey, we need to be ready for this. We need to be ready when our parking lot just goes crazy and buckles up and we have an issue. The air units. Sooner or later, those things have to be taken care of. Past few years, we've had to deal with those. There are different things you can look down the road and see, hey, we need to be ready. And so having collections to have that ready when the time comes is prudent, is wise. And so there's some judgment involved in that, some discernment involved in that. So they get this message here. There's going to be a famine, and there are going to be brethren in Judea that need help. And where is it that this is taking place? Where's this message being delivered? Who is it that's saying, okay, we know there is a need in Judea? Where are the people they're talking to? Just humor me. Antioch. So it's one church sending help to brethren in another area, another region. And when it says to the brethren in Judea, what it's talking about is there's a church in Jerusalem and there are other local congregations around Judea. Because remember, Judea is like a territory. It'd be like a church in Charlotte and brethren in North Carolina or in the Piedmont, if you will. So it's talking about they're going to be sending money from the church at Antioch down to churches in Judea and sending it to the leadership in those churches, the elders, it says here, so that they can make proper distribution, because they're going to be the ones who know the brethren locally who are in need. And so that makes sense, right? Any other thoughts on that? Right, exactly. Bruce. Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly. And so if there's going to be a famine, and it says a great famine throughout all the world, and it says that there are going to be brethren in Judea who have need, were there non-brethren who had need? Were they sending help to them? They weren't doing that. They were sending it to the brethren, not to, hey, the Judea Relief Agency. Let's take care of all of the people in Judea, you know. So that was not what was happening. It was to the brethren. So there's a church in one location that has abilities, monetary assets to be able to send to brethren in another area because they're going to be lacking. They're especially going to be hit hard. Okay, I'm going to come back to that. Just a minute, that exact principle. Okay, so let's go to, John mentioned a while ago, Romans 15. Romans 15, verses 25 and 26. Romans 15, 25, 26. Who's got this? Paul, go ahead.
But I am going to Jerusalem to minister to the saints, for it pleases those from Macedonia and to make a certain contribution for the poor among the saints who are in Jerusalem.
Okay. So before it was Antioch sending down to brethren in Judea. Here there's Macedonia and Achaia, which what you're talking about there is you're talking about Corinth, you're talking about Thessalonica, Philippi, those congregations that we know of that were in these regions of Macedonia and Achaia. Well, they're going to send money to the saints who are in Jerusalem because there's a need down there. So there's multiple churches sending down to the brethren in the city of Jerusalem. So there's the help that's going on there. 1 Corinthians 16, that's what it's talking about. And let's quickly turn there, 1 Corinthians 16, and see that this is the same thing that he's referring to. 1 Corinthians 16 and verse 1. Now, concerning the collection for the saints, as I've given orders to the churches of Galatia, so you must do also. On the first day of the week, let each one of you lay something aside, storing up as he may prosper, that there be no collections when I come. And when I come, whomever you approve by your letters, I will send to bear your gift to Jerusalem. But if it is fitting that I go also, they will go with me. So a couple of principles to pull out of here. Number one is, this is again something looking down the road to the future. And he says, take up these collections because there's a need, and when I come, I'll get it. So there's collections on the first day of the week taking place over this period of time, matter of months. And he says, when I come, I'll get that, and it needs to get down there. And if you want me to go, so you send it by the hands of someone who's trusted. Before Acts 11, it talked about Paul and Barnabas because they're trusted. They can be relied upon to carry that money from point A to point B, and it's not going to get gone or something taken off the top. And so there's a trust factor in this, but it's being managed and cared for properly. One congregation or multiple, just like the churches of Galatia, sending to the saints who are in need down in Judea and Jerusalem and the surrounding area. All right, so help for the saints is taking place there. What types of situations would you describe, or how would you describe the situation of a famine? What is a famine? What kind of event is that? Okay. And what do we call these things? A natural disaster, right? There's an emergency need that has popped up, and it's a temporary thing. So it was not the case that Antioch or Corinth or the churches of Galatia were then on the hook for a decade of sending money to Judea, right? It's not like this is a program that's set up, it's entrenched, it's going on year after year after year after year after year. There's a need that has arisen, it's met. It's done. That's it. Hank.
And this was not a local event, this was a global.
Right.
So everyone was affected. We rarely have that.
Yes. So, like here recently, I think the most recent thing, the floods up in western North Carolina for us, it's bam, it hit. It affected brethren. Brethren from across the country reached out. I had several reach out to me. Hey, are you guys affected? No, we're not. Do you know anybody who is? Because the brethren here want to help out. But whatever help was sent, it's not like there's this program that's set up. It's a temporary need. It may be months in the duration. It could be a year in duration, but it's not an open-ended thing. Okay? Hank.
Perspective. Antioch was about 300 miles from here. So that would have took, what, about 15, 20 days to get there to see something.
Right. Yeah, you going over land, going by sea, what kind of issues?
Fire on the transfer. It didn't happen.
Right. No, exactly right. All right, so let's look at 1 Timothy 5. 1 Timothy 5, here's another case of benevolence, but it's different than all the others that we've read about, essentially. I mean, Acts 6 is very similar, but this is a little different. In 1 Timothy 5, and we need to read verses 3 through 16, so let's break that up just a little bit. Let's go 3 through 10, then 11 through 16. So who will get 3 through 10? Elijah and then Carter.
Honor widows who are really widow. If any widow has children or grandchildren, let them first learn to the piety at home and to pay their parents, so that the building acceptable to God. Now she who is really a widow, like the law, trusts in God, in supplication, prayer, and thanksgiving. But she who lives in pleasure is dead. And these things command that pleasure. But if anyone does not provide for his home, such as the household, he is denied to pay. Not that a widow under 60 years old takes not unless she is the wife of one man, well reported for good work. For she has brought up children, she has washed strangers, she has washed the saints' feet, she is beneath the oppressor, for she has served the Father for good work.
For youth and younger widows, for when they have begun to grow up in Christ, they desire to marry, having condemnation, because they have cast off their first faith. Besides, they learn to be idle, wandering about house to house, and not only idle, but also gossip and busybodies, saying things which they ought not. Therefore, I desire that the younger widows marry, bear children, manage the house, give no opportunity to their adversaries to speak reproachfully. For some have already turned aside after saying, if any believing man or woman has widows, let them relieve them. And do not let the church be burdened, that it may relieve those who are really widows.
All right. What's going on here?
one does provide for himself. If God given that church as a means to not work, not provide for himself. It was just kind of laying down the
Okay. Who is the subject, the focus of the benevolence? Widows. But it's not just widows. Who is it? Ron.
It specifies or identifies here in this act of benevolence for those widows. So when you say there's a series of qualifications that have to be met before that distribution can be given, to your point that you're asking. It's not just widows.
Okay. So to Cruz's point, there's a filter here.
Yes, and that's where, as we understand too, and we touched on it, is how people try to deflect their responsibilities. And this is not a family's right to deflect responsibility if they have a widow that falls within their family.
Right. And I will grant there could be somebody who has family. There's a widow that has family, but the family is dirt poor.
Yes.
And they can't, they're just as destitute as she is. But what this is saying is the widow, number one, the place for her to be cared for is the family.
It starts first with the family.
Primary. And that's why, okay, there's a lot of things to unfold here. But verse 16 makes it very clear. Believing man or woman has widows, let them relieve them, and do not let the church be charged. It specifically says they have family that can take care of them. The church is not to be burdened with this. Don't go there. It's wrong. It's sinful. If there is a widow who has a need and she's got family that can take care of her, you can't tap the church. It's a violation of what he writes here. Cruz, you have something?
Even that was she's not doing fine. Isn't there also a requirement here?
Yes. So you back up to just the widow. Okay, widows, families, take care of them. The widow who can be enrolled, and this is the idea of ongoing, consistent, regular financial help. This isn't the case of that emergency needs that we read of before. This is a case of somebody who is taken care of on a consistent, week in, week out, month in, month out basis, who's destitute. And so the one who can do that has to meet these qualifications. She essentially, to sum it up, she had to have lived a godly life. She's a faithful woman. She's devoted to the Lord. She was a good wife, a good mother. All of that has to be there. And what about the age restriction? At least 60. So a widow who is 55 years old cannot be put into this. Now, that's not saying she couldn't temporarily be helped. This is different. This is regular. This is ongoing. Taken into the number is how he describes it here. So there's those qualifications of her life, of her character, of her age, and all of that. The younger widows, they need to remarry. They need to have a husband. They need to have children if they're of that age. Take care of that. That's where their focus needs to be. Because if they're taken into the number at a younger age, let's just say 27, 30 years old, her husband has passed away for whatever reason, and she's put into the number and her financial needs are taken care of, what's she going to end up doing? More likely than not. Okay, she won't do nothing about it, but verse 13. Hey, she's going to be idle. She's going to be a busybody. Going to be frivolous, foolish. She needs to be engaged and busy in doing what God designed a woman to do. being a wife and a mother. That's what she needs to be doing. Not just sitting around living off the church, just kind of, well, I'm going to go find stuff to do. I'm going to go get involved with other people, find out the latest gossip. No, that's not good. That's not healthy. But the point is, there are very specific restrictions here. Now, why do we need to think about this? Why have I decided, let's walk through this? Acts 2, Acts 4, Acts 6, Acts 11, Romans 15, 1 Corinthians 15, 2 Corinthians 8, 2 Corinthians 9, which we didn't get to, but it's all there. We looked at it last time. Why? Why go through this? Yep. Ron.
Yes, parallel to that is accountability. And as told contemplation, accountability of collection saves. And so if I could just add another nuance to this, when people give to the collection, that is going into the collection as a general, you previously said. And there are things that occur that can be a one-time need that can be satisfied. But the point is, when you give it to the collection, you do not earmark your funds where you want them to go. Because I've experienced that. I don't like that preacher. I don't want my money to be supporting him, but I want you to use it for this.
Okay. Sometimes brethren have tried to put stipulations on, here's what I want with the money that I'm giving. And I want it to go to a building. I want it to go to we want a new projection system, so that's what I want it in it. And if you're going to spend it some other way, I don't want to give it. You don't stipulate that. You don't put restrictions on it when you give. You give for the work. And as the elders determine how that is used, that's how it's to be used, and not putting strings attached to it, so to speak. John?
And if we take the whole Testament, the whole New Testament, we understand that the work of the church primarily a spiritual work. The church is not to be involved in welfare of individuals. We see these stipulations put on that really the church is the last resort for helping even its own members. You have verses throughout the New Testament where somebody's not willing to work, he's not keep idleness in. Somebody's not working, they're not to be helped. Families, we see this in this context, families are to help their own if they don't, and that's sin. So if my sister in Missouri is destitute and she has to turn to the church for help, I'm sinning because I'm not helping her out. She's one of my own. My folks are that way, my mom and dad, my sister, my sister. If I've got family members that are destitute, they should not turn to the church if I can help them. The church is not a welfare agency. So if you look since the 1960s, the U.S. government, the state of North Carolina, and the city of Newton have spent trillions of dollars trying to solve the poverty problem, and it's been a waste. The poor are always going to be with us, and a lot of it has to do with titles. We can't do that. So, we need to remember that the work of the church is primarily spiritual.
Yes, exactly right. Cruz, you have something then, Ron?
Yeah, just parallel to what John just said, all the things let them believe that clearly stated that the responsibility of buying basically doing that embrace the family and that should be
Yes, exactly right. And so one of the things backing up to the 40s, 50s, 60s among brethren that we talked about last time, the church was infected with the idea that the church needs to be helping the poor of the community. And the way that manifests itself sometimes was giving money directly out of the treasury, or they gave money to orphans' homes, or they gave money to old folks' homes, nursing homes. Some places they had a food pantry where they collected together, and somebody comes by, says, "I'm hungry." Well, here's a can of beans, things like that. And they also consider that to be outreach. And the denominations and community churches, one of the biggest things they do is they have this benevolent program of work. In their mind, or their excuse is, well, it's outreach to the community. It's showing the love of Christ to them, and it's going to open up those doors. And it doesn't open those doors. All they do is create this, hey, I can get a free meal down at the Lutheran church on Tuesdays, and I'm going to go get me a free meal, and then I'm going to go back shooting up my drugs and drinking my beer and sitting around the house and watching TV. That's what it does. It doesn't help them, to John's point. It creates a dependency, and it skews God's plan for man and the work that he is to be doing. And so the church, as he said, was not established as a benevolent, taking care of physical needs institution. It was established for the salvation of souls, but it also recognizes in the Bible there are those among God's people that need financial help sometimes. And so here's some provisions to take care of that, but it's just supposed to be temporary. And if it's an ongoing thing, here's the very tight restrictions of who you can help. Widows, not widowers, widows. That they are to be taken care of, they're to be looked after, families to be the top priority. And so it gives very strict restrictions on how that money is to be spent in the area of benevolence. And that's not harshness from God or from God's people. That is the practical reality of how do you keep the focus of the mission of the reason the church was established. Because if you end up turning it to that benevolence, you're going to lose focus on its primary mission. Just like, if I could dare say, within our society, welfare state grows and other things suffer terribly. And so the Lord's put these restrictions. We need to respect those restrictions. John.
So in the Lord's church, there was subterfuge that was used to start all of this. So you go back to that time period that you mentioned. At first, they weren't really concerned about the orphans and all that. What they really wanted to do was fund colleges. The churches said, we're not giving money to a college. So what they did is let's put the brakes on that. Let's get people used to supporting an institution such as an orphanage, food bank, or whatever it is to help the poor. And then if they start doing that, then you can start funneling money off of these colleges. That's really why they started doing that. It wasn't really to help the poor. It was really to fund college.
Right. The emotional appeal was brought in for orphans' homes and old folks' homes so that they could crack the purse, so to speak, and start pulling out of that. Mike. Right. Okay, so let's have what I'm going to say is a little bit of fun. Why is saints only not like faith only? Oh, you guys saying saints only in benevolence, that's just like saying faith only in salvation. What's the difference? Let me tell you, every single case of church benevolence in the New Testament says saints, believers, disciples. Every single case. And when it comes to faith, what does it say? James 2:24. Man is justified by works, not by faith only. Very specific. So when you look at passages concerning church benevolence, it is always saints only. when you look at passages concerning salvation, well, it says faith, repentance, confession, baptism. It says other things. You can't find other things in the area of benevolence. It's just not there. All right, so James 1:27. James 1:27. We'll read that for us. Paul, go.
Pure and undefiled relations before God and the Father is this, to visit or orphans and widows in their trouble, and to keep oneself unspotted of the world.
Okay, so the argument is right there. Says we're supposed to take care of orphans and widows. Church needs to do that. True? False?
You don't want to take that verse on its own. You need to look at the context around it. He's talking about his tongue, his own heart, one's own religion, and let every man in verse 19. So the context here that we're talking about addressing individuals, what their responsibilities are. So you're looking at the authority of individuals, not the authority of the church. Very clear in the context.
Exactly right. Context is individual duties, responsibilities, and obligations. Right. Exactly right. It's not addressing the church as a collective and their work and activities. Okay, so Galatians 6:10, this is what Mike mentioned a while ago. You know, if there's a worldwide famine, we have, some decisions to make in our personal life. What are we going to do? What's our duty? What's our obligation? Maybe we have resources. Okay, what do we do with those resources? So Galatians 6:10, who will read that for us? Charles.
Therefore, it can't offer to then it's too good at all, especially to those who are their house of faith.
Okay, again, this is, if you read down through here, this is the context of individuals. But it says, we do good to all, but especially to those of the household of faith. So we have priorities here. We take care of family, right? Family is where we're going to be taken care of. 1 Timothy 5, verse 8, verse 16. We take care of family. Then if I have beyond that in this benevolence case, help out with brethren. And then the world. So there's a priority here that we have to use judgment, discernment. And, let's say if we have $100 and we decide, I'm going to give 70 to the brethren who need something and 30 to my neighbor here because he really needs something. That's within your purview to do. But we do have some priorities here. Okay, what about, it's a good work. It's a good work to help people in the community. It makes the community feel good about us.
Well, it is a good work if you use the liberal definition of that term. But as we understand Ephesians 5:9, Titus, and also Stephen over in 2 Corinthians chapter 9, it defines that if we're talking about the funds of the Lord's church, it's specific to the saints.
Yes. What defines a good work?
The things that are done that God has before ordained.
Okay. And 2 Timothy 3:16 and 17, all scripture are given by inspiration of God, profitable for doctrine, for reproof, for correction, for instruction in righteousness, that the man of God may be equipped for every good work.
In the context of what the scripture.
The Word of God defines good work, not you, not me. It defines a good work. You know what? What if we, a new highway that solves the traffic problems around Charlotte, is that a good work? I would think so. Yeah, it'd be nice not to have traffic. What does the church have to do with that? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So let me ask you this. When you think about people's arguments, and brethren have made this argument, the church can do what the individual does. And they cite James 1:27, visit orphans and widows. The church can do what individual does. Where's the faultiness in that logic? Well, the church should love your wife. Hank?
I say Matthew 6 tells us how we should be doing with our charitable giving.
Okay.
Matthew
But-
6:1. Take heed that you do not do your charitable deeds before men, to be seen by others. Otherwise, you'll have no reward from the Father in heaven.
Okay.
That's the difference between me and church.
Hey, bear with me here a minute. Matthew 25:36. Jesus says to those before him on the day of judgment, I was naked, you clothed me. I was sick, you visited me. I was in prison, you came to me. Can I, as an individual, start a clothing store that sells clothing at a discount to help out in the community for those who are poor and in need? Can the church? No. Now, Salvation Army thinks can. But can somebody who's sick, if I decide that I want to start a medical clinic, can I do that personally, individually? Start a medical clinic and help people absolutely free. Yeah, totally. Can the church? No. Okay, very good. All right, so if I wanted to say, you know what, these criminals on the street, something needs to be done about them, I'm going to start a private prison, I'm going to contract with the state to hold their prisoners. Can I do that? Is that a good thing? Okay. Keeping criminals off the street is a good thing. Can the church do that? No, can't do that. All right, so Jesus, at times, I just want to get to this. He told his disciples, come aside and rest for a while. If I wanted to buy a campground and have a place for people to camp, relax, and get away, is that okay? Can the church do that? No, it can't. There's a difference between individual activity and church activity. And we need to keep a clear distinction. Don't let people make you feel ashamed or embarrassed for standing firm on that. Because we're simply trying to do what the Lord would authorize us to do, not what our emotions and things would carry us into. So, all right, Lord willing, lesson 7 next week.